Hi guys, along with Fool of the Week, I think we need another segment called Lee Anderson of the Week, because the Reform UK MP stood up in the House of Commons on Tuesday and made a complete backside out of himself. Now, this was on the issue of grooming gangs, but fortunately, Jess Phillips, the Home Office Minister, was available to put Lee Anderson back in his box. Have a listen.
Anderson. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The cover-up continues. We have a Prime Minister who never wanted a national inquiry. We have a Minister who never wanted a national inquiry, and we have the Labour backbenchers who never wanted a national inquiry. So does the Minister agree with me that the victims of these horrific crimes will never get the justice they deserve as long as we have a Labour government in charge?
Minister.
It's quite impressive that you would stand up and say that after a grooming victim stood up and spoke on these benches, but you know, I've learnt to expect it. When the honourable gentleman stands up and talks about cover-up, I understand that or maybe he's doing it for clicks, I don't know, but I understand that he thinks he's doing, you know, God's work in fighting this. The level of bad faith, the idea that it's easy to find a chair or easy to find people who want to step forward and take part in this process when it is mired in, I have to say, political point scoring like he just did. I have to say, I think that he should really question his own morality.
Well said, well said. Lee Anderson has no morality. Reform UK are jumping on a bandwagon here. Weren't they also calling for another inquiry? They said that they would set up their own inquiry. What happened to that? They're not interested in victims. They're only interested in using them to score political points. When Lee Anderson said, well, the Prime Minister was not interested in a national inquiry and the Minister was not interested and Labour backbenchers were not interested, I responded to this before by saying that you need to implement the previous findings of the findings of the previous inquiry before you move on to a new inquiry. Because remember, an inquiry takes a long time. It requires victims to come forward who are still suffering from trauma to talk about their experiences. That's extremely stressful to people. It's also stressful for those who are listening, who are taking part in the inquiry, who may not have suffered this trauma directly, but are suffering it indirectly. It's a very serious thing to call a national inquiry and bring people forward. And as Jess Phillips has pointed out, it can be difficult to find people who are willing to step forward. Not every victim wants to talk about their experience, and understandably so. But what Reform and, sadly, Kemi Badenoch and the Tories are trying to do is jump on a bandwagon or create a bandwagon and use the victims as a tool in politics, which is beyond disgraceful. They have nothing but contempt for the victims because, as I said, and others have said, you first need to implement the findings of the previous inquiry and then move on to the next inquiry if it's justified. But first implement, and remember the Tories refused to implement the findings of the previous inquiry. And some of these Tories that refused to go along with it are now in Reform UK or supporting Reform UK. The same Reform UK who said that, we need to have another national inquiry. They're not interested in a national inquiry. They're interested in point scoring. They're interested in bandwagons. They don't care about the victims. They pretend to, in order to damage Labour, to damage the government. This is contemptuous. How can you use the victims, the most vulnerable people in society, people who have been abused? How can you use those people as political pawns or political tools? What does it say about people like Lee Anderson or Reform UK? They have nothing but contempt for victims. They're using them as a tool. And they're hoping that this tool will bring down the Labour government. Does anyone honestly think that if a Reform got into power tomorrow, they would start implementing the findings of the previous inquiry? Of course they wouldn't. They don't care. Because some of the Tories who were supposed to be implementing the previous inquiry are now in Reform UK. The victims and people who support reform as a result of these inquiries and as a result of these grooming gang investigations need to realise that Reform and Lee Anderson and Nigel Farage are not on their side. They never were and they never will be. They will pretend to be in order to damage the Labour government. And that's it. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think, and I'll see you in the next video.